Ethan Carter woke before the sun, as he always did. The morning inside his small diner began with the soft hum of the refrigerator, the hiss of the coffee machine, and the gentle creak of the old wooden floors. He wiped his hands across the counter, glancing at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 6, which meant customers would be stepping in soon. His daughter Lily was still asleep in the tiny room above the diner. Her shoes rested by the stairs, one pink and one red, because she had insisted on keeping them mismatched. Ethan smiled when he saw them. Since Lily's mother had walked out years ago, he had been both mother and father. She was his whole world, and everything he did was to make sure her days were brighter than his. Ethan moved with the calm rhythm of someone who had done this ritual for years. He cracked eggs, sizzled bacon, and checked the tables with practiced eyes. The diner had been in his family for decades, though some believed it should have closed long ago. To Ethan, it was more than a place to serve food. It was the heart of his small town, a place where people came for warmth more than meals. The street outside was just waking. Trucks passed slowly, store shutters lifted, and a faint chill hung in the air. When Ethan flipped the sign to open, Mrs. Dalton, one of his oldest regulars, was already waiting by the door. He gave her a nod, served her the usual coffee, and chatted politely about the weather. Everything felt steady, predictable, almost ordinary. But fate doesn't send warnings before change arrives. Just as the clock struck 9, a black car pulled up outside the diner. It was sleek, polished, and far too refined for these narrow streets. The door opened, and a young woman stepped out. Her heels tapped gently against the pavement, her neat hair shone under the daylight, and her dress spoke of a world where money floated like air. Her name was Claire Hamilton, though no one inside the diner knew it yet. She had grown up far from small-town life, raised in the shining glass towers of her father's empire. Years abroad had seasoned her with elegance, but also carved a hollowness inside her. Returning home hadn't been her choice, but her father's demand. To Claire, another meeting in another echoing boardroom felt like a cage closing tighter every week. She pushed the glass door open, and the little bell above it jingled. Heads turned, curiosity flickering behind familiar smiles. She walked with grace, her eyes scanning the diner with vague interest before settling on a corner table. She carried herself like someone used to polished restaurants, not chipped counters and laminated menus. Ethan noticed her immediately. It was hard not to. Strangers rarely stood out so sharply against the backdrop of his diner. He waited behind the counter, letting her settle. Before he could approach, Lily came bounding down the stairs. Her hair was still rumpled from sleep, her arms clutching the worn teddy bear she never let go of. "Buddy, I'm hungry," Lily announced before spotting the stranger. On her rush, she bumped against the edge of Claire's table, sending a small glass of orange juice wobbling until it tipped. Bright liquid splashed across Claire's expensive blouse. The diner went silent for a heartbeat. A few regulars gasped, eyes darting between the little girl and the woman frozen in her seat. Claire looked down at the spreading stain, her face unreadable. She had endured rooms of men circling like predators, yet never something as simple as juice on her clothes. This was new. Before any unease could tighten further, Ethan approached with steady steps. His voice was calm, low, and certain. He placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. "She's with me." The words were simple, but layered. To anyone watching it, was a father defending his child. But to Claire, the steadiness in his tone struck deeper than surprise. There was no apology wrapped in fear of consequences, no trembling under her sharp gaze. Instead, his calmness became a shield for the little girl, and in an odd way, it felt like a shield for Claire too. Lily peered up at Claire with wide, innocent eyes. "I didn't mean it," she whispered, small and sincere. Claire hesitated before letting her lips curve into the faintest smile. She dabbed at her blouse with the napkin Ethan offered, her hand brushing his for the briefest moment. And though to the rest of the diners, it was just another small-town accident, something unspoken passed in that silence. Claire, the billionaire's daughter now back in a world she thought she had outgrown, felt a strange pause in her chest. Ethan, the single father who carried weariness with such quiet strength, couldn't quite look away. A collision that neither of them had planned had just unfolded, quietly binding two very different lives at a simple wooden table. Claire never imagined she would walk into the same diner again, yet somehow she found herself there 2 mornings later. She told herself it was only because the coffee had been surprisingly good, or because she wanted to see more of the town she had once dismissed as dull. But deep down she knew it was not about the coffee at all. It was the quiet man behind the counter and the little girl who had spilled juice on her silk blouse. When Claire entered, Ethan was lifting Lily into a tall chair behind the counter. Lily waved happily when she saw Claire. Ethan gave a small nod, polite but cautious. His eyes carried the same calm weight she remembered, as though storms could rage outside but never break him. Claire ordered a simple breakfast, ignoring the disbelief in her own mind that she was choosing bacon and toast over luxury dining. As she ate, she watched father and daughter move together. Ethan handed Lily small crayons and a pad of paper, and Lily began to draw with fierce concentration. Claire had been surrounded by luxury her entire life, yet watching the girl smile over a crooked picture of a cat warmed her more than any ballroom could. Later, Lily climbed down from the chair and skipped toward Claire's table. "I made this," she said, holding up a drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands. Claire looked at it with surprise. "It's me and Daddy and—" "Who is the third?" she asked softly. Lily grinned wide. "That's you," she said before running back to Ethan. Claire stayed frozen once again, staring at the childish lines. Nobody had ever sketched her into a family before. Ethan had seen the exchange but stayed silent, focusing on wiping the counter. He wanted to protect Lily from disappointment. At the same time, something inside him stirred. He had kept walls around his heart for years, walls that no one had come close to shaking until this woman stepped into his small world. Claire felt both wonder and fear. She had grown up with people who used names and fortunes like weapons. Here she was treated like anyone else. No one whispered about her designer dress or her surname. Ethan didn't ask about her money, only if she wanted more coffee. It left her unsettled and calm at the same time. The next week she returned again, after another long meeting at her father's office. Leonard Hamilton had been planning new contracts, pushing Claire to expand the family empire. He spoke to her like an asset, not a daughter. After hours of being reminded who she was supposed to be, she craved the diner's chipped tables and the quiet certainty of Ethan's voice. She began spending longer stretches there. Sometimes she read a book. Sometimes she listened to the steady conversation of locals, and sometimes she simply watched. Ethan was cautious, but Lily was not. The girl quickly grew attached, tugging Claire's hand to sit with them, showing her drawings, and even asking Claire to read bedtime stories when the diner grew quiet late at night. Claire learned things she had never thought about before. She learned how proud Lily was of her mismatched shoes, because they are special that way. She learned how Ethan always chose the seat near the window for customers who came alone so they could feel a little less lonely. She learned how laughter could fit between the cracks of an old building and turn it into something beautiful. Yet with every new moment, the gap between Claire's world and theirs became clearer. Her clothes and careful elegance highlighted a difference she could not ignore. Ethan's life was full of simple needs and heavy responsibilities, nothing like her carefully groomed existence. When she left the diner each time, reality pressed back down. Her driver reminded her of meetings, her phone filled with reminders, and her father's voice echoed about responsibilities and reputation. Ethan felt the difference too. At night, once Lily was asleep, he often sat at the dark counter replaying her visits in his mind. The way she listened so carefully, as if every word mattered. The way her laughter, soft and unsure, filled the diner with a new kind of warmth. But along with it came unease. She belonged to a world of power and wealth, a world he had no place in. Still, neither of them stayed away. Claire kept returning, drawn by something she did not yet understand. Ethan kept watching, torn between pushing her away and letting her in. And Lily, innocent and hopeful, quietly connected them each time she tugged them closer together. A fragile thread had been tied between 2 lives that could not easily meet. Yet with each passing day it grew stronger, as if destiny itself had chosen a love story neither of them had dared to imagine. Whispers began to travel through the small town. It was not common for the billionaire's daughter to sit inside the old Carter diner several times a week. People watched with quiet curiosity as Claire entered with her careful grace and left with traces of laughter clinging to her face. Some wondered if she was only passing time. Others believed it was more. Ethan tried not to care about the glances, but he could not avoid them. Every time Claire stepped through the door, he felt both peace and pressure. Peace because her presence filled the room with brightness. Pressure because he knew townspeople could be quick to judge. He worried too that Lily might be caught in talk she did not deserve. One evening, Claire arrived after work, her hair pulled back, her expression tense. She ordered coffee, but barely touched it. Ethan noticed the stiffness in her shoulders and walked over with quiet steps. Lily was busy under the counter with crayons, her small voice humming as she drew. Claire looked at Ethan, and for a moment, let the mask drop. "My father thinks this is a waste of time," she said softly. "He wants me focused only on the company. Says spending hours here makes me look careless." Her hands tightened around the warm cup. Ethan studied her face, could see the strain she carried, the weight of a life she hadn't chosen. "What do you think?" he asked. She paused, her eyes dropping to the coffee. "I think this is the first place I've ever felt like myself in a long time." Neither of them spoke for a while. Silence was not empty but full, as if their thoughts were speaking quietly across the table. Lily broke it by climbing onto the chair beside Claire, proudly showing her newest drawing. "It's a house with 3 windows," she explained. "One for me, one for Daddy, and one for you. So you can always look outside with us." Claire's chest tightened. She brushed her hand over Lily's hair with tenderness. Ethan felt something stirred deep inside, both joy and fear. Still outside, the warm diner light shadows stirred. A man in a dark suit entered quietly, carrying himself with a kind of sharp presence that belonged in business towers, not modest restaurants. He walked straight to Claire's table and introduced himself as one of Leonard Hamilton's assistants. The message was simple. Her father expected her at a dinner that weekend, dinner that would involve business partners and a carefully chosen man her father intended for her to marry. The words sliced through the calm atmosphere. Claire's face went pale. She nodded politely to the assistant, who left as quickly as he came. Ethan's jaw tightened, though he said nothing. Lily, sensing the tension, slipped her small hand into Ethan's. After the man left, Claire whispered, "This is why I came here tonight." Knew he was planning something. Her voice shook with quiet anger. "He sees me as a name, a signature on contracts. He doesn't even care what I want." She looked at Ethan, eyes burning with both fear and fire. "Sometimes I think he doesn't even know me." Ethan wanted to reach across the table, but his hands stayed still. Part of him wanted to tell her to escape all of it. Another part reminded him of the difference between their worlds. He finally said, "He doesn't get to decide who you are." Claire looked at him with surprise. Her lips parted, then closed again, as though the simple truth in his voice was harder to handle than her father's commands. Later that night, as Claire left the diner, Ethan stood at the window watching her car drive away. Beside him, Lily tugged his sleeve. "Is Claire going to stay with us forever?" she asked with bright innocence. Ethan's heart ached, because he had no answer. In that moment, he realized the thread pulling him and Claire together was now too strong to ignore. He also realized storms were coming. The town was whispering, Claire's father was interfering, and his own fears were tightening around him. Yet when he thought of her soft smile as she listened to Lily explain her drawings, he knew the battle was already inside his heart. The calm life he had built was shifting. It was no longer just about protecting Lily. Now he found himself wanting to protect Claire too, even if the world told him he had no right to claim her. The wind was sharp the night Claire stood outside her father's mansion. The long steps stretched upward like a pathway to judgment. The lights inside glowed with golden shine, but to her it felt more like a cage than a home. She had been summoned, not invited, to a formal dinner with business partners. Her father, Leonard Hamilton, was waiting with carefully measured smiles and expectations. Inside the grand dining room, laughter filled the air, but none of it touched Claire. She sat at a long table surrounded by men in tailored suits, who exchanged words about investments, as if human heart had no place in the conversation. Beside her sat a man named Victor, chosen by Leonard as a possible husband. His smile was charming but empty, his questions rehearsed, each one tied to her last name rather than her spirit. Throughout the dinner, Leonard's eyes kept landing on Claire, heavy with silent warnings. She could hear his voice even before he spoke. It told her to obey, to play the role, to honor the family name. But while his world spun around figures and agreements, Claire's mind wandered back to a small diner with creaking floors. The sound of crayons scratching paper and a calm voice saying words that still echoed inside her. "She is with me." When the evening finally ended, Leonard pulled her aside, his mouth curved into a smile that never reached his eyes. "Claire, this is the life you belong to. Men like Victor are a good match. It's not some man who cooks eggs in a roadside diner." Claire's chest tightened with fire she had not felt before. In the past, she would bow her head and agree, keeping her rebellion locked deep inside. But this time, she found her voice. "You don't get to choose who sees me and who doesn't," she said firmly. "You don't even know who I am beyond the name you built." For the first time, Leonard's expression shifted from calm control to cold anger. "You will not disgrace this family by chasing something ridiculous. We'll end this before it damages both of us." Claire walked away without replying. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, but her heart beat louder than the sound. She knew she could not go back to silence. Hours later, she pushed open the door of the diner. The room was nearly empty, only one late customer lingering quietly with a slice of pie. Ethan stood behind the counter, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his shoulders heavy from a long day. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering in his eyes. Claire moved closer, her voice breaking. "He wants me to marry someone I don't even know. He wants me to forget that I've ever been here. But this place and you and Lily, it feels real. And I don't want to lose it." Ethan froze, his hands still on the counter. Everything inside him fought as he listened. Part of him wanted to step closer, to hold her, to say she already belonged there. Another part shouted warnings about pain and disappointment. Yet he could see the truth trembling in her eyes. Slowly he came around the counter and faced her. "I've vowed to keep my distance, because I didn't think I could give you the life you were used to. I don't have mansions or cars or fortunes. I only have this little place and my daughter. But every time you walk through that door, it feels like too much to walk away from." Tears welled in Claire's eyes, though she kept her voice steady. "I don't care about the things I grew up with. I don't care about mansions or dresses. I care about the way Lily runs to me with her drawings. I care about the way you look at me like I'm not a prize but a person. For the first time, I care about what makes me feel alive." For a moment, neither moved. The air was heavy yet tender. Then Ethan lifted his hand, carefully brushing a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, almost uncertain, but the meaning behind it spoke louder than words. Lily peeked out from the kitchen with her teddy bear, eyes wide with wonder. She smiled brightly at the sight of her father and Claire standing so close, as though her picture of three figures holding hands was no longer just a dream, but something real forming in front of her. In that quiet diner light, both Ethan and Claire knew they had crossed a line that could never be unseen. Her father's empire still loomed outside, and whispers in town were sure to grow louder, but between them stood a choice neither could deny anymore. It was not about a clash of worlds. It was about belonging, about finding home in each other, when the rest of the world tried to pull them apart. The days that followed were heavy with both fear and hope. Claire knew her father would not surrender quietly. Leonard Hamilton had spent his life building walls of power and pride, and he hated to see cracks forming. He sent messages firm and cold, reminding her of her duties, her future, and the disgrace she would bring by staying with Ethan. Claire read them and set the phone aside, her heart steadier than ever before. Ethan felt the pressure from a different side. Whispers in town grew sharper as people began to talk about how a woman like Claire didn't belong in a small diner. Some said she was only passing time and would soon return to her true world, leaving him and Lily behind. Ethan carried the weight of those words when he locked up the diner each night, though he never spoke of them to Claire. Still, inside him, the old fear stirred. He had been left once before, and part of him feared it might happen again. Claire was not like anyone else in his past. One quiet evening, she arrived at the diner when the chairs were already stacked on tables. Lily sat by the counter with her teddy bear, fighting sleep. Claire walked over, took Lily's small hand, and whispered, "Go to bed, little dreamer. I have to talk to your daddy for a while." Lily smiled sleepily and climbed upstairs. Claire faced Ethan with determined eyes. "I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending I live in my father's world, when every part of me tells me I belong here. I want to choose this life, no matter what it costs." Ethan's voice was low. "Claire, if you stay here, he might cut you off. He might make you lose everything. "Then so be it," she answered. "'Cause without this place, and without you, I will have nothing anyway. Money doesn't make me alive. You and Lily do." The honesty in her words broke through Ethan's walls. For years he had protected his heart, but in that moment he realized loving her was no longer a risk he could avoid. It was already a part of him. Days later, Leonard came to the diner himself. He entered with the air of a man used to respect, his polished shoes against the old floorboards, causing silence to sweep across the room. Ethan stood straight, his shoulders steady, as Claire faced her father. "This is where I belong," she said, her voice clear and unshaken. "I will no longer be part of your plans and arranged tables. I'm staying with Ethan and with Lily, not walking away." Leonard's face hardened as if carved from stone. For a long moment he said nothing, only stared at her. Then, without a word, he turned and left. The silence that followed was heavy but freeing. Claire felt her breath release at last. She had chosen. The following weeks were not simple, but they were honest. Some townsfolk remained skeptical, yet others softened when they saw how naturally Claire settled into life at the diner. She helped with menus, arranged flowers on tables, and even carried trays with laughter that seemed brighter each day. Lily adored having her close, pulling her into games, drawings, and bedtime stories. Slowly, the image of them together spread through the town, not as gossip but as truth. On one warm evening, the diner filled with the sound of music and chatter. Ethan had organized a small gathering to thank the town for their loyalty. The smell of pie drifted through the air, glasses clinked, and laughter echoed louder than any rumor ever had. Claire moved through the room with joy lighting her face, greeting people not as the billionaire's daughter, but as someone who had finally found her place. Later, when the night settled and the last guest left, Claire sat at a table with Ethan and Lily. The little girl leaned her head on Claire's arm, half asleep, yet smiling. Ethan reached across the table, his rough hand covering Claire's gentle one. They exchanged no sharp promises, only a knowing look. They both understood that their lives were no longer made of two separate worlds. They had chosen a single path together. It was not a world of wealth, nor a world of empty expectations. It was a world of laughter in an old diner, of bedtime stories, of unpolished truth, of love that had grown by accident yet became the most real thing they had ever known. And as Claire brushed her fingers over Lily's hair and met Ethan's calm, steady gaze, she knew she had not given up anything at all. She had only found what she had been searching for her whole life. She was no longer frozen at the table. She was finally home.